Hello, 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 everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kieran Howells. I'm the head of content here at HR Grapevine, and I'm very, very happy to say that we're here today to talk about such a crucial subject, breaking down barriers around inclusion and inspiring prospective candidates in the process. This session is actually brought to you in partnership with our friends at Handshake, and we have some truly amazing individuals with us today, including Nerida Rooney, the head of employer brand and strategic resourcing at Kier Group. We also have Sianda Mangaza, and I've actually got early careers recruiter down here, but I know that has changed, hasn't it, Sianda? So I'm sure you'll correct me on that and tell us why in a minute as well. She's also from Kier Group. It's fantastic to have you with us. We've also got Emily Nucky, the strategic employer partnerships at Handshake, and also Diana Jury, who's the customer success at Handshake. So brilliant to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining. This is going to be a great conversation. But before we dive in, a tiny weeny little bit of housekeeping for our audience. We're going to have some polls live. In fact, the first one should be live on your screen right now, to the right, just over there. And we'd love to hear what you have to say. We've got a couple going throughout the session, and we just really want to hear from you. So really, really great if you don't mind answering those. And yeah, we'll hear what you have to say on that front. And then we're also going to have a bit of time towards the end of the session to do a bit of a Q&A. So what that means is everyone here will be totally available to answer any of your questions. I'm sure you're going to have loads. So get them in the Q&A chat, which again is just over there under the other banner. So yeah, click on that and get your questions in. We'll get through as many as we possibly can in the time that we have. And I'm sure that we'll get to any that we haven't got to in our conversation afterwards as well. I'm sure they won't mind catching up with you afterwards. So before we find out what the results to that first poll is, I would love to pass over to our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about them. Maybe Nerida, do you mind kicking us off?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Kieran. Hello, everybody. So my name is Nerida. I am the head of employer brand and strategic resourcing at Kier. So essentially, within that role, I have to make sure that we as a business are attracting more diverse candidates into our organisation. And diversity can mean so much more than ethnicity and race. So we'll be talking about a bit of that today and how we've broken down some of those barriers. So handing over to Sianda.
Hi, I'm Sianda. I'm an emerging talent recruiter within Kier Group. So just alluding to what Kieran said, we were called Early Careers, but we have recently changed the name of our team to Emerging Talent to become more inclusive, because your career doesn't just start in your young years. So yeah, I deal with apprenticeships, graduates, placements, and Kier degree, and yeah, really enjoying that. Busy times at the minute, but it's great. I'll pass over to Emily.
Thanks, Sianda, Nerida. Yeah, so my name's Emily. I'm at Handshake, and I'm in the employer team here in London. I've had the pleasure of working with the wonderful team at Kier Group since July on their emerging talent recruitment, and particularly engaging underrepresented talent. So really looking forward to today's conversation. And I will pass to Diana.
Thank you. And Diana Jury here. I'm on the customer success team. I'm based in the US office, so from San Francisco. I work with our employer partners who are, again, working to recruit more inclusively. I definitely have a little bit more of a focus on DEI, so really excited to dive into that today.
Perfect. Thank you all so much, and especially to Diana, because you had to get up so early to be with us today. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time. I actually just got a message from my team saying that for some reason the poll is slightly broken and is not clickable. So we're going to come back to that later. Always lovely when technology lets you down, isn't it? So we'll come back to that a little bit later. Hold off trying to answer for now. As soon as we get that sorted, we will get back to our audience on that. So I guess first things first, I'm handing over to Emily to tell us a little bit about Handshake and everything that's going on there.
Thank you, Kieran. So I think some of you are very familiar with Handshake, but some may not know anything about us at all. So I did just want to give a really brief 2-minute introduction to who we are before we jump in. So Handshake is the largest early talent network in the world. Our mission is to democratize access to opportunity for students. So we work towards the goal of having students have access to the best opportunities, regardless of where they may have studied, which university they go to, who they know, what their parents did. And the Handshake platform in itself is a three-sided network where we bring together universities, students, and employers. Our core model involves Handshake becoming the official university careers center software. So all of their students are in the platform. They have equal access to as a direct to student model. What this means particularly from a D&I perspective is employers are able to bridge the gap with students from wider participation backgrounds, take a really personalized and targeted approach that creates equity in the attraction process. In terms of our network, globally, it equates to 1,400 university partnerships, over 10 million active students, three-quarters of a million employers. In the US, we are the status quo. So Diana's joined from the US team where we started in 2014. In terms of the UK and Europe, our growth is really, really rapid. In around 18 months, we've grown the network to over 15,000 employers, coming up to 30 official university partnerships, and an active and growing network of 270,000 students and alumni. And we started working, as I mentioned, with the team at Kier Group on their early talent strategy earlier this year. And we've been really, really impressed with their commitment and their proactivity in breaking barriers and challenging the status quo in the industry, and really being very creative in the way that they engage students from wider participation backgrounds. So very excited to be having this conversation with Kier today, and I'm going to hand over to Nerida to introduce.
Fabulous. Thank you, Emily. I apologize as well. As much as I've tried to get the dog to be asleep, she's deciding to pick up some toys. So I'm really, really sorry. But the joy of working from home. So a little bit about Kier. Obviously, there's lots of information here on the slide, and you'll see the slides at the end of it as well. But Kier essentially is a large construction and infrastructure business, and we recruit about 1,500 jobs at any one time. So lots of volume. And within our emerging talent space, we sort of have two very big cycles throughout the year where we do really big recruitment campaigns for that, which is where we've been working with Handshake. So Kier, you probably know us maybe of building some local schools or hospitals or prisons, and we do maintain most of the UK roads as well. So our core and everything that we are about is about trying to be as sustainable as we can. Everything that we do within Kier, we want to make sure that our employees get to work safely and get home safely. So sustainability, health and safety, and DEI are all in the core of everything that we do. I'll hand over to Diana.
Thank you. Lovely. Thanks, Nerida. So before we dive into discussion, I wanted to share a little bit more about Handshake's philosophy around DEI and some data that we've collected. As a whole, providing talent with equal access is the driver of Handshake's mission. We're focused on democratizing access to opportunities for all candidates. So regardless of their location, connection, socioeconomic background, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or ability, we want to remove barriers for candidates to pursue their careers. And we all know that DEI has become a really big focus over the last few years, both for employers and folks launching their careers. More than ever, it's really important for an employer to recruit diverse talent, and not just because it's important to candidates, but there have been tons of research and lots of data that's shown that from a business perspective, companies that have more diverse team do a lot better when it comes to revenue. So that's definitely an important factor as well. So diving into some more of the data, so some highlights. So first, 84, based on surveys that we've done, 84% of ethnic minority young people have said that they are worried about barriers or challenges due to their ethnicity when it comes to looking for work or employment. So this is really important to consider when you're thinking about just the mental barriers that folks are really facing and the challenges that they perceive that they have. And the second piece that kind of goes into this is, and we found that 39% of students worry about whether their educational background, especially their institution that they attended, will impact their ability to get a job. So this is something that we're also really working to challenge and help employers like see beyond their school strategy and really core schools that they're traditionally are used to recruiting from. This is a really big topic at Handshake, and something that we're really helping employers to rethink and challenge their traditional ways of approaching university partnerships. And thirdly, one data point that we thought was interesting was 24% of candidates worried they can't afford to relocate for a job opportunity. This really opens up the conversation about different policies that employers have in place that make jobs seem more accessible, or even possible, or feel possible for candidates as they're looking for opportunities. So definitely important in terms of, okay, what are some actual tactical things that employers are able to provide to help challenge some of those barriers. And moving on, so in terms of folks that are, again, when candidates are looking to apply to employers, they really, more than ever, we saw 53% of job seekers would not apply to a job or internship if employer lacks general diversity. So this generation is a very socially conscious one. Gen Z is really holding employers to a much higher standard of responsibility than previous generations did. So that's definitely very exciting. And finally, one data point that that was exciting to us is the direct impact of shifting sentiment towards DEI. So not surprising, 97% of employers have said that how they build diverse teams, or making sure that early talent and building diverse teams is one of their top priorities. But really where we want to continue this conversation, take this to is, okay, great, we hear that it's important to you. What does that mean in terms of actual actions and policies and tactical things that companies can do to make this, to make it easier for them to actually recruit more successfully? Lovely, awesome. So with that, I will hand it over to Kieran so we can jump into a little more of the discussion.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Just to say, I think our poll is now working. So to our audience, if you can answer that, that'd be fantastic. We really love to hear what you say, and we'll pick up with that in a little bit. But first things first, and this is to our friends at Kier. So you are on the 2022 top 100 inclusive places to work. That's an amazing achievement. Big congratulations for that. So the question there then, really the key one is, how can employers move away from treating diversity like a box ticking exercise and into more authentic and diverse practices?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So having true representation in the business and encouraging people to bring their whole selves to work. It's absolutely critical. We want to make sure that people, can absolutely be whoever they want to be when they come into an employer like Kier. There absolutely needs to be an education piece as well. So that internal open dialogue with two-way communication is critical. And actually being honest about where the gaps are. So there will be some uncomfortable conversations, but nobody's going to be perfect at this. So we need to help educate ourselves from those that may have lived experiences or may be able to support us on that journey, but really having an open and authentic conversation that isn't just from the top. It absolutely needs to be all variations within the organization. Sianda?
Part of the way that we do that is we have our inclusion network. So we've got, I believe it's 5 inclusion networks at the minute. So we've got armed forces, race, gender, ability, and the Pride network. So yeah, we use that to, be more authentic, using people's lived experiences and their allyship to other marginalized groups. We use that to sort of educate people around the business, and also it's a good place for people to have like a place to talk really openly and sort of do things like that. But one thing that we're also really big on, and everyone should be big on, is that when there's certain days of the year, for example International Women's Day or Black History Month, we have to be really mindful that although we have these set days to celebrate these events, it's not just a one day activity that we should be doing. It should be all year round, and I think that our networks really help us sort of do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. Yeah, really good. I guess, you raised such a good point there that actually those days are maybe to highlight issues, but a 365-day approach is the best way to do things. So just before we dive into our next question, I'm really keen to hear what the audience have to say on that original question that we asked them. So we asked you, have you built DE and I policies into your recruiting process? So 0% said no. So that's interesting and probably a good thing, right? 28.5% said yes, and 71.4% said we're working on it. So the vast majority of people can get a lot out of this conversation to realize how they can do that better. And it's good to see that it's on the agenda for a lot of people. So to come back to Kier, obviously diversity and inclusion, it's been a huge topic in the workplace and continues to be discussed. But what does it actually mean for Kier Group? How do you define diversity, and why do you think that's so important?
I think it's different for everybody, and I think that's why it's so important to really use those employee networks, because what it means to me versus what it means to Sianda or what it means to various people in our organization, it's about listening, it's about communicating. We have a diversity and inclusion roadmap, and we are absolutely transparent with that, both internally and externally. So you can visit our website and you can absolutely see what that roadmap looks like and where we're actually focusing for the next few years. And then there's some programs as well that we have which are really exciting for us. So there's our Making Ground program, which is our program where we support people that are either currently in prison or have left prison and getting them employment opportunities. There's the work that we do with our armed forces. So we've recently re-signed the Gold Award, and we have armed forces placement programs as well to support people who are currently still serving, getting them experience into employment to transition back into civilian life. We have a partnership with RefuAid as well, which is where we support people that are currently refugees in the UK. How do we support them in getting really meaningful employment? There's many people in that program that have really great experience, and sometimes they come to this country and they need to do something that's completely different in order to work. We want to make sure that they can still be engineers, doctors, pharmacists, for example. Family friendly, so having really true family friendly policies. Again, we're very transparent on those. And returners is another really key one for us as well. There's lots of people within the employment market that have taken a really big gap, either through COVID and having to take caring responsibilities, or having to take time out to be a parent. We want to be able to transition them back into employment. And another area as well are people with the current economic climate. They're having to come back from retirement to still be able to support themselves through that stage. So being able to support various different buckets is really important to us. Sianda?
So for me, like Nerida said, what D&I means for Nerida and what it means for me are, different things. So for me as the Black woman, for me, it's important because you want to be able to come to work and you want to be able to speak about, what you did on the weekend or something that may have irritated you on the way into work and stuff like that. And, so many things can happen just in, outside of your work life. For example, the rate that Black men are being stopped and searched is only increasing. And, you want to be able to have a culture and an environment where if something like that does happen to one of your employees on the way into work, they know that they are going to be supported, they're going to be able to speak about it. And maybe if, they're not as talkative as normal, people will understand and it's not going to be sort of looked upon negatively. And part of the way that we're going to be, doing more work within the DE&I space, I'm actually moving into a role within Nerida's team, and I'm going to be looking at the diversity in our recruitment, looking at these initiatives such as Making Ground and Armed Forces, and sort of just looking at different ways to sort of, make sure that everything that we say we do, we are doing, and just being that line of support for people internally who, still need to learn, because we have to be honest about that. D&I is such a big talking point, but, not everyone's at the same level of understanding of it. So we do have to be really honest about that. And I'm really excited to move into that. Again, a part of the reason why I'm really excited to move into that is because, with my own lived experience, it's really, really amazing that I've been given this opportunity, and that actually Kier has seen that my lived experience is not a negative, but actually a positive. So part of that lived experience is that I actually started with Kier through the Making Ground program. I actually met Kim, who is currently the diversity and inclusion recruitment manager. She actually came and saw me in prison in 2021, and that's how we met. And she recruited me, and she saw through, the prison walls and the scenario that I was in, and she actually listened to me, and it was amazing. And it was the first time in my whole sentence that I actually felt like a normal person, and it was great. And one of the things that people, it's a common misconception, I think, with these sorts of initiatives, is that we're not giving people jobs as well. We're not giving them just a job without them going through a process. We're giving them access to opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have, and just giving that access to the opportunities, even if that person isn't successful, it does so much for their self-confidence. But I can say that I am a true lived experience through the Making Ground program and the initiative at Kier, and that actually they're supporting me fully, which I'm really, really grateful for and really happy to shout about.
Well, that's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Sianda. I mean, it's one thing to talk about these initiatives, but actually to hear the story of someone, how it's worked for you, how it's kind of transformed a part of your life is amazing. That's fantastic. So I'm going to turn to our friends at Handshake now. I'm going to turn to you, Emily, and ask you a question, and that is basically, oh sorry, actually I'm going to ask Diana this one first, and then I'll come to you, Emily. So it's basically why diversity and inclusion is so important to Handshake as a company as well.
Yeah, and before I dive in to answer that question, Kieran, I want to say thank you, Sianda, for sharing that. That was really a really great story. I got tingles, so that was lovely to hear. But to jump into the answer in terms of why Handshake diversity inclusion is important to Handshake, it is really the fabric of how Handshake was created. So our origin story of how Handshake was created as a company, our founder and CEO, Garrett Lord, attended a university in rural Michigan and was part of a really rigorous computer science program. And when he was looking for an opportunity, they realized they really didn't have any employers that were willing to travel all the way to their university in order to partner with students or recruit students, and saw that him and his classmates really didn't have access to these opportunities just by virtue of where their school was located, not because of any of their skills or their ability to succeed in a job. And so this is really where we built our ethos, which is democratizing opportunity for all, regardless of background, race, all of these different attributes that a person will have. And so this has really been the guiding our North Star in terms of how we approach our entire company and how we've built Handshake. So that's all related to, again, democratizing access.
Fantastic. Sounds really good. Nice to hear, a story again that really relates to the human element here. Right, I am going to turn to you, Emily, this time. Sorry. The question I'm asking you is, your graduate employer priorities report came out earlier this year. So can you tell me a little bit more about that and how DE&I relates to it and came into it?
Yeah, sure. So we conducted some research here in the UK alongside the Institute of Student Employers, the ISE, who are fantastic, and we do lots of work with, which was really to understand the priorities of graduate employers over the next 12 months and then looking into the future. And we all know that graduate hiring in general is becoming a lot more competitive. We found, similar to other studies, that only 3% of employers are planning to reduce their graduate hiring next year, despite the global economic situation. And 97%, Diana mentioned this earlier, 97% of employers told us that recruiting a diverse workforce is a top priority, was the phrasing. And I think for me and my colleagues in the conversations that we have with employers, the big question is always, what does that mean? Because it's very, very easy to say, oh yeah, we care about diversity. And I truly believe that when I have these conversations that people do care about diversity. I think if people said the opposite, it would kind of be a bit unacceptable. But if you haven't defined that, and if you don't have metrics, how much is it actually a priority for your business, and how can you actually be accountable? So in our partnerships, we want to be very metrics driven, and we want to have a quantifiable impact. We want to be accountable. So I think the first thing that I would say is, if you are one of those 97% of employers or organizations for whom D&I is really important, the first thing is to define that, to define what success looks like. And as Nerida and Sianda have said, like this is going to be various different things to different people in the business, but having that plan and that transparent plan, like Nerida described, and having real ways of measuring and tracking your progress. But in an agile and ongoing way, so that you can know what's working and you can actually move the needle.
Fantastic, thank you for that. So I'm going to turn back to Kier here and ask you, as an organisation then, building on what Emily was just talking about, how do you actually measure diversity?
Yeah, so I think there's different times to measure. So there obviously needs to be regular monitoring. It can't just be sporadic. So it needs to be constant monitoring, and whether that's from the attraction stage. So what are the demographics of the people that we're attracting? And there's different technology that absolutely supports us with that. And then from an employee point of view, what is our employee demographic makeup? What does that look like? How many people internally are being promoted from different demographics or different diversity or inclusion programs? So we absolutely monitor that quite regularly, and we do actually share a lot of these statistics externally as well, obviously with the gender pay gap and so forth. So and then obviously Handshake, they give us the data on who we can attract as well. So within that platform, we're able to specifically target types of demographics that we want to have really meaningful conversations with, whether that's through a roundtable event and really talking to them about what they want to hear about, or whether that's via the Advocates program as well. So there's all different ways that you can get that data. We actually have a lot of alliance or joint venture partners that we do support them with their wider D&I piece as well. So we need to collectively do more as an industry to change the face of what construction look like. I don't think it's going to be something that we as an organization can do alone. We need everybody to be working towards that, because the demographics and the makeup of the construction industry is not diverse. So we need to do it with lots of us. Sianda.
So, another way that you can measure the sort of diversity and the inclusion in your organization, obviously we've got metrics and data, but the more that you see people championing your business on LinkedIn, or just on social media in general, talking about how much they love their job, the different initiatives that we're doing and how they've been able to actually use their voice and feel like their voice is heard, that shows also that you're going in the right direction. The more sort of referrals that we see of candidates who are from these diverse backgrounds, again, that shows how you're going in the right direction, because at the end of the day, word of mouth is very, very powerful, and your current employees are not going to be recommending your business if you are not going down the right track. So that the power of word of mouth is definitely something that if you see those referrals coming in, you're going down the right track. And also the more that you see, like, internally, your people bringing their whole selves to work. So this could be something like myself when I'm working from home and I do Teams calls. I've normally got a headscarf on or a bonnet, because I have afro hair and I don't always want to do it. So and I feel comfortable enough coming onto a Teams call like that, and there's never ever been any negative comment about it. If you are seeing people in the office wearing their noise cancelling headphones and you haven't seen them wearing those before, again, that shows that you are going down the right path. So I think there's data and metrics, but it's also just how the vibe is feeling in your business and how much more people are showing their true selves at work.
Yeah, I love that idea that actually, you should be able to see around you the effects, the positive effects, and it's great to see people feel empowered to really be themselves in their organization, because they're going to be happier, healthier, everything's going to be better for them in their careers. So that's fantastic to hear. So then, can you tell us a bit about some of the challenges that Kier has faced when adopting a more diverse hiring strategy, and also not just the challenges, but also how you've overcome them as well?
Yeah, so naturally there are going to be changes. I think, if we talk about the Making Ground program, for example, there is absolutely misconception, amongst many of our managers when we were talking about this sort of program. Oh, I'm not sure about that. I don't know if I want to have somebody that's currently either in prison or has just left prison working, around my team. So there was a big education piece, but as soon as they have somebody that joins them, honestly, it just completely changes their views on things. And I think the more we can do that, the more we can support both the people currently on that program or the people in the organization as well. There was certainly as well with the RefuAid program as well. I think many people that have come via the refugee program, they're coming from displaced countries where they're fleeing conflict, and actually they need to have different sorts of support. So RefuAid, for example, gives them lots of support around English language or conversion, so converting their degrees to the UK market. So they'll sort of help them with that, and actually they help them financially as well to get them to where they need to. But what we found is when they came to interview with us, there was still that sort of either a language issue or a confidence piece as well. So giving our managers interviewing techniques and really talking to them about how we need to tailor our interview styles for different people. And we've definitely seen more success with that. And we're going to be launching a mentoring program as well, so that those internally can mentor people currently on the program. They might not be employed by us, they might not have anything in the pipeline, but we're supporting them so that they can get that confidence before they get into employment. Because many of them as well, if we think about Ukraine, most of the people that came from Ukraine are mums with children, and their partners are still fighting in Ukraine. So because men weren't allowed to leave. So they've come here, they've got all of that happening, in their life, but they're having to support their children with getting into schooling and juggling all of that and needing that flexibility. So absolutely having a really clear, flexible working policy is key. And then the other one is certainly around returners. Those people that have had really large gaps from employment, they suffer massively with confidence. So much has changed. If we think about even pre-COVID to post-COVID, like even that period, like so much has changed in the working world. I've recently supported somebody who's had 10 years out of work because they've looked after their children, 3 children. She needed time out. And actually she's now getting back into work. And it was just a virtual coffee between her and I to help build that confidence so that when she went into an interview, she knew that she was comfortable in that space. Sienda.
When it comes to sort of challenges, we, have challenges when it comes to sponsorship. I think everyone's seen those horror stories on the timeline of where it's taken months and months and months for someone's visas to come through, and the project's already started, and those sort of things. So we do have challenges with that, with hiring managers being sometimes reluctant to sort of venture into that sponsorship sort of route. But the way that we sort of overcome those challenges is hiring managers who have had really good experiences. We encourage them to, share those experiences via our company intranet, or just by, chatting. And what we do find is that, say there might be, for example, 5 hiring managers. If 3 of those have sponsored a candidate and are talking about it and how amazing it was and how exciting it's been, then the other 2 get jealous and then they're like, yeah, we want to sponsor everyone. So, we sort of do it like that. It's just about talking about, the barriers that can sometimes be there and sometimes have certain impacts, but it's about talking about how much the positives really do outweigh the possible negatives. So we're seeing that coming on strength to strength, but as well, we've got virtual hiring. So in the emerging talent space, we do our assessment centres online. So, you know, that can cause issues in terms of language barriers, you know, people's surroundings. So like some of our candidates may be in sort of squashed, sort of cramped dorm rooms, or, you know, they might be in a shared housing, and people, you know, maybe they aren't considerate, or they don't know that they're on an interview and can barge in the room and things like that. Or maybe their background, you know, that sort of house embarrassment piece, and you know, that can happen, and it can affect people. And you know, we let our line managers know that, you know, one, we're recruiting for potential, not knowledge. You know, you can't take someone's background, a little tiny snippet square, into consideration when, you know, you're assessing these people for the roles. But also it's about, you know, I was in a situation where my house is actually getting renovated, and a glitch on Teams happened, and I couldn't blur my background or anything. So I basically had to sit there, and I was like, so you can all see my my crazy renovation going on. And you know what, just being honest about it, and just being like, look, we don't all have backgrounds that we love, but you know what, don't worry about it. Don't let it affect your confidence. Sit comfortably wherever you can and just do the interview, and it's fine. And that really helped the candidates. So yeah, I think sometimes just being real, just being really real and authentic to line managers, to candidates, to everyone is the best way to overcome the challenge.
Mm-hmm. I loved what you said there about the idea of, you know, what you can see in this very small box. It does not define that individual. It sounds from both of you like the keys are imagining people complexly, you know, seeing the whole human being, and checking your biases as well at the door before you make any decisions and before you meet anyone, I guess.
Always, yeah.
Some really, really good points there. So I guess it's really interesting that we have Kier on the call, we have Handshake. I'm really interested to hear how those two came together. You know, how has the partnership with Handshake shaped your diverse attraction and hiring strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll hand straight over to Sianda for this, because this is definitely her bag. Obviously, we've got a great relationship with Handshake, but the dog's clearly barking, so I'll go over to Sianda.
No, that's fine. So yeah, our partnership with Handshake has been great. I know that there were talks about partnering like before sort of June. I think, was it June or July that we met at RecFest, Emily? So but you know, the first time I met Handshake was at RecFest. We had such an amazing conversation. It was so much fun. And yeah, since then it's just gone from strength to strength, really. So Handshake really, really help us with our attraction and hiring strategy in terms of DE&I, because we're able to really drill down as to what types of candidates we want our roles to be sent out to, you know, so we can go into those sort of protected characteristics, sort of, you know, gender and race, ethnicity, things like that, disability as well, because we just want to make sure that, you know, everyone has the access to our roles, and everyone understands that, you know, you might be a student, but you might not be able to work full time. You might be a carer, but that's fine, because we offer part-time graduate roles as well. So it's really helped us be able to drill down with that. We also have been able to introduce an advocate strategy. So what we've done is we've selected certain people from around the business, ranging from senior leaders all the way to sort of contributors to the business, and being able to offer our candidates like 15-minute coffee chats with those people, because we know that Gen Z really are interested in the values of a business. How can they progress? You know, what can the business actually offer them? So, you know, we are able to give them that chance to have that 15-minute ask whatever question you want. Don't be afraid. It's not going to go anywhere. They, you know, they have those really lovely chats. And then it just helps them decide whether we're the employer for them. And you know what, it's been really positive, like really, really positive. We've met some great candidates through Handshake, candidates that we would never have accessed. So it's been fab, and I do really think that it's really going to continue to help us in emerging talent with shaping our strategy and making sure that we are continually hiring the most diverse candidates that we can.
Yeah, and just to feed off on that as well, because we've actually recently removed the need to have specific grades or specific degrees for our graduate programs. And the reason for that is we absolutely want to support people. You know, they might have went in and did an arts degree, but actually might not have enjoyed that and might want to move into a different type of career. So having those advocate programs are so critical, because you can really have a conversation with somebody that, you know, may not have had the same degree, but they still have that potential to be the right person longer term. When I was at school, or when I was sort of going through my career, this is not where I thought I was going to be. So I think we want to make sure that if they've done a geography degree or if they've done a law degree, they can certainly move into any areas within Kier.
Fantastic. And so I guess the natural follow-on question is for you, Diana, which is, how does Handshake actually help employers with diverse hiring and attraction?
I love this question. So this is really what I do in my role as I work with our different employer partners in the US. So we have a couple of approaches. So the first, we really focus on the tactical steps. So we know they care. Okay, great. How can that translate into actual practices that can improve? So the first piece is, one, we want to help them understand, we want to understand what their real challenges are regarding DEI. Are there a specific group that they're having a hard time reaching out to or building a relationship with? And we also really want to make sure we can help them define their goals. Like, what is ultimately the specific goals that they have around DEI? Because it could be a really large, vague thing. So wanting to have really specific goals there. And the two approaches that we have is, one, we explore their existing hiring practices and try to challenge their current policies, and we'll highlight the ones that might be exclusionary. And the second piece is the proactive portion where we focus on the tactical steps that they can take in Handshake to improve, try different strategies, and to reach out to candidates. So the proactive piece can look like, one, being intentional about reaching out to candidates from underrepresented groups, where when they're looking at their applicants that are coming in, where do they notice that there's a gap? Where do they notice that you're not getting as many applicants from a certain group or background? Really trying to understand where those opportunities are, and experimenting and proactively reaching out, but really being intentional about that outreach too. So they're building long-term relationships. It could be with student organizations at universities, like really deepening their university partnerships, kind of expanding their reach. And in addition to that, we want to make sure that employers are also able to meet candidates where they are. So their candidates will be in different, depending on their background, there will be different ways that are ideal in terms of connecting. So it's not just a message, it could be a coffee chat, it could be a group, it could be an info session or one-on-one sessions. Different folks have different preferences in terms of what they're comfortable with. Also what they have access to. Is it virtual environment that's easier for folks to attend and be a part of, or is it an in-person piece where they can attend on campus? So again, really diversifying their outreach and adapting based on the results that they're getting. Mm-hmm. And then the piece that I love is really exploring their current practices and really highlighting where they might have not realized, okay, this is actually exclusionary, or just because hiring practices that have just been grandfathered in or have just existed for a long time that we haven't really explored. So for example, some include non-transparent job descriptions. So really important to be really open and clear about what the expectations are for the job, avoiding language that's assuming that candidates need to be super, super qualified, or looking at it, approaching it from a growth mindset and looking for folks with certain skills as opposed to hard qualifications. And so opening up the job description. Second piece is avoiding narrow application windows as well. So we find that really tends to be a factor that really prevents folks from applying to opportunities maybe they're not able to get to it or need more time in order to complete it. And so trying to expand or be more flexible with candidates in terms of when they're open to applying or they're open to accepting applications. So again, in addition to that, avoiding those really strict qualifications and those degree, grade or cut off. So really, and this goes into this whole idea of really challenging these historical ideas of what a great candidate is. Is it just these accolades, or are we looking at the person and their skills and what they can bring to the table and their potential? Because again, access to these opportunities in terms of institution, the schools that they attend or the programs they could have been a part of is not really due to their potential, but just the opportunities that they were afforded. So really making sure that they understand that they're not compromising on quality of candidates, they're just opening it up to more that they might have missed out on in the past. And a really big part of this is expanding an employer school strategy. So typically we often see employers have a very narrow scope and they only want to hire from schools that their current employees have attended, they're just familiar, it's safe, but that really excludes a ton of candidates. Again, it goes into whether that candidate really had access to that opportunity earlier on when they're a student, before that, et cetera. So again, just really all of these different attributes that might affect a candidate's, especially candidates from underrepresented backgrounds. And we've really focused on employers, or really encouraging employers to focus on sourcing based on type of skill or experience, as opposed to emphasis on degrees and very more traditional accolades. So those are some of the strategies that we employ or help encourage employers use.
It sounds like throwing out the kind of the traditional recruitment rule book in a way, doesn't it? It's like everything that you thought you knew traditionally about the concept of meeting new talent or hiring people. It's all a bit wrong, really, isn't it? And maybe outdated. That's really interesting to hear. So it can be very overwhelming to, as a company, to start out on that journey of realizing perhaps that everything that you have been doing is wrong. And DE&I strategy is a huge part of that. So what I'm wondering is if we could just, from everyone really, get some top advice for the first steps towards moving into a more inclusive hiring approach.
Yeah, fabulous. I'll go first. So I think start small. You won't be able to do it all. There's lots of charities that will be able to help you on your journey with different programs, but sometimes it can be really overwhelming because you want to do everything. But start maybe with one program and broaden out. I think the other thing to remember as well is COVID has taught us that people absolutely want flexibility. So many of the roles that we advertise now at Kier are full-time, part-time, your choice. We want to understand what it is that you're looking for. It might not be the 40-hour weeks anymore. It might be, do you know what? I can only do 30 hours or term time or something. So having a flexible approach and benefits that really support people through every stage of their life, whether that's, somebody looking to have children. So maternity leave, like we offer, 26 weeks full pay, paternity leave, 8 weeks full pay, baby loss, policies as well, because we know that not all pregnancies end happy. And then there's also the support for people going through the menopause. That's a really critical point that we don't talk about enough. So having flexible policies to support people in different parts of their lives. Sienda?
So this is my excuse. So I haven't had as long to get used to Teams as everyone else, because I actually was in prison when Teams was and Zoom was about. So I still forget to turn my mic on. So basically, with the emerging talent team, we work in partnership with a lot of universities that have a high number of people from different ethnic groups registered, and sort of work in partnership with them. And we are starting to do a lot more work with schools in order to sort of pipeline for apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships. So I think it's really important that, especially for the construction industry, when we talk about the gender gap, when we talk about the ethnicity gap, you need to be appearing as marketable, to these groups. And the best way to start is from school age. A lot of the things with the construction industry is more of a societal issue, and it's just people's perceptions of the industry. So actually, if we go in from a young age and say, actually, I work in construction and I love it, and I still get my nails done, and I still do this and I still do that, then more people are going to be open to it from a younger age. But I do think advice for anyone starting out, I think, and I always say to candidates, remember that we need the candidates and the employees more than they need us. And at the end of the day, before, big brand names would keep someone in your employment, but now it won't. I think COVID has taught everyone that, and people know their worth as an employee. So if you're not providing, you know, the tools for them to be flexible and to manage, have that good work-life balance, whilst also feeling comfortable at work and, you know, feeling accepted for their true self, then they will leave. So it's only in an employer's best interest to continue to move forward with the DE&I strategy.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. Yeah, really good. Handshake crew, what's your perspective?
I can kick us off. So in terms of, again, where to start, one thing that I really try to emphasize, and I think Nerida had a similar point, is just to start, you have to start somewhere, and it can feel like this really big, scary thing, but you don't have to solve everything at once. And I think the most important thing is that you start somewhere, really making sure that you first understand what you mean when you say that diversity is important. What does that mean for you? Be really clear about how you want to measure that and use that as a starting point. And I hear so many times from employers that I work with, they're like, we really don't have a diverse team. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to hire Black talent because we don't have anyone on the team that's Black. Well, great. Every organization has hired someone who's Black, has had to hire their first Black employee at some point. And so what's important is making sure that you're creating the environment that candidates from different backgrounds will feel comfortable in. So making sure you understand those needs, being really clear about, again, have pay transparency, talk about the different benefits that you have that can support them in that role, that you are, as an organization, committed to DEI, not just in what you say, but how you're actually putting it into practice. And candidates will see that sincerity, and that's what's going to help you really get traction. So most important thing is that you have to start somewhere. You can start small. You don't need to do everything at once, but again, just holding yourself accountable to actually taking steps as opposed to just saying that it's important, because we hear that all the time.
I agree with everything that's been said. I think, yeah, like so many amazing topics. There's been such a breadth of things that we've talked about today. I think for me, the top thing that I kind of always come back to, and particularly from some of the conferences I've been to recently, is that I feel like there is so much great work happening out there, and there's so much positive intent. You know, we had lots of sign-ups to the webinar today. We went to the ISC EDI conference last week. The room was packed. It was full. So there's all this great work happening, but like we cannot get complacent. And I think that many of us have an assumption, particularly those of us with, like, you know, most of the privileges, have this assumption that progression just happens, like it's linear, things automatically get better, and that's just what happens with innovation as the years go by. But it is not true. And the last few years have taught us that, with the pandemic, but also political decisions that have been made. I'm sure we can all think of a few of those, economic challenges. At the conference I went to at the ISC, Professor Lee Elliott Major spoke, and he's the social mobility professor at the University of Exeter. If you haven't heard of him, which I hadn't before this conference, look him up, Professor Lee Elliott Major. And he said that the social mobility gap is now widening. It's getting worse. There is more downward mobility right now in absolute terms than there is upward. And that is new. Like that is for the first time in decades. There's people are, you know, moving downwards more than they are upwards. And in early talent, we have an opportunity to make a really, really big difference here. We've got literally like the future of the population in our hands, and we're making these decisions. So I think for me, my biggest suggestion is just to take that really, really seriously and not get complacent, because it doesn't work, the historical approach. We wouldn't be having this conversation today if what we've been doing till now actually worked. So challenge your internal stakeholders who want to keep doing things the same way, want to keep going to the same unis, want to keep their processes, challenge them. We have this responsibility. We've got a big opportunity to turn things around. So dig in and get on with it.
Amazing. Yeah, really, that's really interesting. I'm definitely going to look that professor up myself as well. That's fantastic. So we've had a couple of really good questions from the audience. I'm really interested to hear what some of you have to say on that. The first one, I think, actually references something, Diana, that you said. This individual says, you mentioned you recommend employers avoid narrow application windows. That's an interesting thing to pick up on, because what they've asked is, what application window have you found is actually optimum? Yeah, interesting one there. What do you think about that?
A good point. So you'd be surprised, especially with like for example, like consulting firms or accounting firms, where they'll have at least in the US, very narrow application windows where they're only accepting applications for sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes a month in the fall. And so really making sure that they're expanding that so candidates have time and they're not really restricted to that time because they might not have even heard about the company, been ready to or prepare for that application and be ready for that opportunity. And so just allowing also employers to have time to also reach out to candidates that proactively reach out to candidates and invite them to apply. And so just avoiding application windows that are, I would say, less than 3 months if possible. So if that looks like opening up the application earlier, that's also great. But if you do internally have a hard deadline in terms of when you need to start making or finalizing those hires, and start earlier so candidates have more time.
Fantastic. And there's another interesting question here. When you, and this is for Handshake as well, although I'm going to ask it also to Kier, slightly adjusted in a minute. When you approach conversations with employers, when you're recommending major changes in their recruitment processes to make it more inclusive, how do you do that? How do you actually start those conversations?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It can be really difficult, and especially something that you have to navigate really carefully, because one, you don't want to assume that their current policies are inherently coming from an exclusionary place. You want to also make sure you understand why they have the different hiring practices in place and what the different needs are of the employer. And then deciding, okay, where do you see the biggest opportunity, or where do you see there being like the biggest barrier to candidates being able to come in terms of like their current process. So we try to start with just a couple of areas before we really can change everything. And that way you're able to test and see, okay, what are the results when we expand your school network? What are the results when we open up the application window? What are the results when we change or tweak the language in our job descriptions? And then based on the results based on what we see happen after that, then we can kind of explore and expand that to the rest of their hiring practices. But it is something that we try to navigate just really, again, like thoughtfully. You don't want to come in and say, you're doing this all wrong, because we don't know that. What we can say is like, this is the data, this is what we've seen work, this is what we've seen not work, and this is what we've heard from students, and we give them that information so they can make their decision in terms of how they change. Again, this can be something that multiple levels within the organization needs to look at. So these changes might be a little bit slower, but it is something that conversation we love having.
Yeah, it is really interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, that initial contact that you're going to have with businesses it's going to be a very essential conversation, and how they react to that is going to be very essential. I'm wondering, Emily, if you have anything to add to that about kind of getting on board with that conversation.
Yeah, I think Diana put it really brilliantly. It's a process. We actually like the way that Handshake works. It is pretty new to almost all the employers that we speak to, so we're used to doing this kind of change management, and it's about starting small, being intentional, and being iterative. But I'll let Kier, or you wanted to ask a similar question to Kier.
Yeah, exactly. I want to kind of flip it on its head a little bit. So it's a great question, but it also completely applies to both Nerida and Sianda within Kier. How do you identify within your own organization the need for change? How do you look at yourself objectively and see, because there's no such thing as being done here, is there? I mean, there's always progression to be made.
There absolutely always is progression to be made. And I think it's important to recognize that if we want to have the same results, we'll continue to doing the same stuff that we've always done. And actually, the world has evolved so much, and we need to sort of listen to what's happening. So in order for us to change the face and the shape of what construction looks like, we have to change as an industry. Making sure that your interview practices are, people are going through various different training. So we have expect respect training for all of our employees. We have unconscious bias training for all of our recruitment managers and the recruitment team. Yeah, because we're the ones that are doing the initial sifting as well. And actually, even in my own team, as part of the employer branding piece, making sure that they're aware of how what we're putting out there, how the messaging is landing, because we need to, constantly get feedback from different minority groups, and we'll never change if we don't make some big practices and policy changes right from the start. We are fortunate that our leaders are absolutely backing us and working with us on that. I think sometimes it can be really difficult when you're trying to make a change and you don't have that support. So, we are fortunate in that place that it is, led from the top down, and that everybody is going through those changes.
Fantastic. Anything to add there, Sandra?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think Nerida covered most of it. But I'd also say that our sort of call it out campaign and expect respect, it definitely helps, because at least then any employee within Kier feels comfortable enough that if they see or hear something that, they can call it out and say, and they will be supported by their management and by their team. So I think, again, giving people the space to be able to do that also helps us sort of police where we, might not be going amazingly, or where things might go a little bit skew, because they do, and that's just that. But yeah, that's all from me.
That's great, fantastic. I'm so sorry to say that we are out of time. It feels like we've had about a 2-minute conversation, but I guess that means it's been interesting, right? So thank you so much to all of you, Nerida, Sianda, Diana and Emily. Amazing to speak to you. I know I've learned a lot from this conversation, so I'm sure the audience has as well. And to our audience, thank you so much for your time. I hope, it has been as interesting for you as it has for me. You can see on the screen some details of how to get in contact with Handshake if you would like to. There is so much more to cover. We have literally skimmed the surface in this call. So yeah, loads more to cover, but it's been fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.